first we thought we'd talk about a bit about your experience of gaming. I mean, my memory of you is at a conference talking about how the wonders of your youth when you suddenly realised the television could be something that you didn't just watch, but that you could plug something in the back and it was suddenly you were in control of the television by playing a game with it. And it always struck me that was a really interesting metaphor, because having grown as an old situationist, I thought that was are you just being sucked further into hyper-reality, as Jean Baudrillard said, or are you really breaking the spectacle and actually making your own TV?
I mean, I guess it depends, who you are and what your context is. I mean, I think the reason why, and I usually hate telling stories, but I think the reason why the story of maybe my or your discovery of video games might be illustrative or useful is we were alive before they existed. So in some ways, if you're not native to a particular media environment, you have a little bit more perspective on the change. So if you were alive before manuscript writing, and then there's people writing things, you're going to say, oh, wow, look how things change now that we can write stuff down. People are lying, people are writing contracts, people are putting down their histories. And I felt, the first moment I saw a video game, it was actually in a hotel, where it was a console in a hotel. And it was, like for most people of my generation, it was a game called Pong, which was two white squares on either side of a black and white monitor.
Mine was Space Invaders in a pub.
Yeah, Space Invaders was a drop later, but yeah. And with Pong, it was these two white squares, and then you're hitting a little ball back and forth, a little dot between these two squares. And anyone from my generation remembers where they were and when it was that happened. The same way that we remember, the moon landing or an assassination. It was, oh my God. And when you think back to that moment, we were not thinking in America, oh, what a beautiful simulation of table tennis. This is fantastic. We're going to be able to practice table tennis on this new game and then compete more effectively against the Chinese when we're, at the next Olympics. That's not what we were thinking. All we were thinking was, oh my God, I can move the pixels on the television screen. This formerly sacred turf of Walter Cronkite and I Love Lucy, and whoever was allowed to make TV, had such power to be able to put their images on that box in the living room, this magic act. And now the pixel had been liberated, the technology had been demystified, and we could just play. So the television, really changed for a lot of us from this read-only medium to a kind of a read-write medium, to something where even to imagine, this was before we had, video cassette recorders and could make TV ourselves, but it was the very beginning of taking control of the pixel, and then of having stories on the television where I'm the protagonist, rather than me watching some Aristotelian hero go up his inclined plane of tension and down. Now I'm the player making at least what feel like choices through a game world. And that it fundamentally shifted our relationship to television. And I think it opened up the idea, at least for a moment, for those of us who were alive during that transition, that if this medium has been arbitrarily a read-only medium for the last 50 years, and now it's a read-write medium, what other media in our lives and in our world could be flipped, thanks to digital technology, into read-write media? And for me, that flip always meant playability. For me, playability was synonymous with, is it open to my intervention?
So is Pong Internet 1.0 then?
In some ways, there's certainly interactivity 1.0 but because it wasn't really networked. It wasn't a networked phenomenon, but you were ideally playing against another person. There were two knobs, two joysticks, and it did turn the TV into a way to meet rather than just to be alone.
So now we have this it's gone all the way through over 30, 40 years, and we have this whole phenomenon of gamification with, like, Jane McGonigal, classic Californian ideologist who goes jogging in Berkeley, saying that we can use the game metaphor, this interactivity that you talk about, to actually create all of parts of our lives. We can actually make ourselves happy workers for surveillance capitalism through gamification.
Once I hear people talking about using a medium, oh, we can use this medium to get people to not like war, to get people to work against hunger, get people to do that. Now it's using the media platform as propaganda. How are we going to get people to do something? So I'm using the technology on the people. And that's whenever you get a liberative technology, what I call bad people, but the controlling people, the ones who don't trust humans, they'll say, "Oh, how can we use this to control human behavior?" So you'll have, Norbert Wiener talk about systems theory, and then Margaret Mead come along and say, "Oh, how can we use systems to understand and control human beings?" Or in this case with games. Oh, so there are these people playing together and learning things and cheating and spoil sports and all that. But what we can do is impose the content we want into the games in order to program human behavior. And, once games get serious in that way, and I get it, there's some great ways to convey important ideas through games, the same way you can in a book or a nonfiction book or any documentary. But I think that you end up sacrificing the more vital and important element of games, which is play. And the spirit of play gets broken once you're applying the play to a particular thing. This was one of the rules of play in Huizinga's great book, Homo Ludens, which means man the player. It is that when you play, you create a sacred circle around the play. And once you step into the sacred circle, nothing can matter. In other words, a player who's playing basketball for the money and the contract, that's not play, that's work. Once you're playing for a reason, or if you win this game, then you get the money, or you get the girl, or whatever it is, you've broken the genuine spirit of play. And that's serious games feels like applied play, like applied sexual energy or applied anything is no longer. You might lose the essence of the thing. What Horkheimer would call the capital R reason for something gets surrendered to the small r utilitarian reason to exploit it.
Do you think then games should be completely non-utilitarian? They've got to be trivial, to be the escape from work, or can they actually be used for work purposes? I mean,
non-utilitarian is not synonymous with trivial.
Yeah.
Right? Non-utilitarian.
I'm just winding you up for yes,
right?
Yeah. But we can use games for education, for subversion.
Yeah. Right. As long as we also, yes, we can apply anything, and that's fine. But I wouldn't want to apply games at the expense of the sacred phenomenon of gaming, the sort of sacred collaborative enterprise of gaming. What happens in a fantasy role-playing game between 5 kids who are making up their own story, those kids will have a fundamentally different experience of life than kids who only watch, Game of Thrones on TV.
So are we going to move from competitive gaming to collaborative gaming? A lot of people think at the moment, this is the radical thing, is not to actually have one-on-one competition or multiple competition, that we should all play games where we learn to work together. But that maybe is also what, Jane McGonigal is also saying, that we collaborate through gamification to make more money for the man.
Well, gaming and gamification are almost, to me, the opposite things. So, yeah, I do like collaborative play as practice for collaborative life. And I love the idea of, instead of having board games like Monopoly, these sort of winner-takes-all games, training our kids for life, and rather have them work together to solve a problem. And you win as a group, or you win even as a team. It's better than as an individual. But yeah, to have different kinds of outcomes, and to learn to trigger, whatever, serotonin and dopamine and all those oxytocin things that you want to trigger, but learn to trigger them through collective success. The interesting thing about gamification is it tries to take the energy of play, even agonistic kind of competitive play, and then apply it to something else. But most of the things that I see, that business talks about as being gamified, the gamification, if anything, just camouflages the fact that these are already games, right? The stock market is not a real thing. The stock market is a gamification of the market. The market is a gamification of sharing, So now we're going to gamify the stock market. Why do that except to try to make the stock market look more real? It's back to your Baudrillard. It's like, let's do a simulation of that. So it makes the simulation, the simulation that you're simulating then looks real in comparison with the game that you've just created.
But can we learn through gaming? Is that the utilitarian way?
Sure. Well, we do learn through gaming. What is you're going to practice for the math quiz. Yeah. There's going to be a math quiz. Does that mean you've entrusted this 11-year-old to build a bridge based on the equations he learned about angles? No. You're going to take a quiz and you're going to get a score. The quiz is gamification of the knowledge of the building. So yeah, education is already gamified.
But how can we subvert that?
The way we subvert that is, and I think it's a necessary subversion, is to because if we keep going in that direction, we're going to say that, you use an iPad in the class and the kid's going to play a better game, a better quiz game, and Quizlet and this and that. You end up emphasizing memorization and things like that. I think the way we subvert that is by deciding that the most important thing that you can learn in the classroom is how to socialize with the other people in the room, is the sort of the mimesis experience that you get by being in the room with an adult who is demonstrating the practice of learning and discovery for you. So now it becomes much more about your body and their body, and how does it make me feel to watch someone else learning, and how do I imitate that behavior? It's very different than I'm going to play the game of, raise my hand and have the right answer.
So is this how we all join as members of Team Human?
It's one of the ways we do, is by looking for the ways that figure and ground have been reversed in our society. When was teaching, which, as I understand the history of it, public education, when was teaching, which was meant, at least by some, as reward for the working class? If they're working in the coal mines all day, at least they deserve the dignity of being able to read a book and participate meaningfully in democracy, that it was turned into an extension of work, where we have the principals of our schools and presidents of our universities going to CEOs and asking, what do you want our students to learn so they'll be better workers, right? So corporations are externalizing the cost of worker training to the public school system, and the very purpose of education is undermined. The dignity, the idea that it was compensation is completely reversed. So we look for opportunities to restore the integrity, the essential value, the capital R reason, the non-utilitarian right that humans have to celebrate their existence just for having gotten here in the first place.
So we want to celebrate the dignity of play.
Well, play is one of the best ways to do that. Wait a minute, you're not accomplishing anything? No. It turns out this is not training you for anything in particular. This is just fucking play. You are just celebrating being alive and engaging with other people on this field. That's what Huizing has said. He said, we all try to think, that dogs and wolves, they play as practice for the hunt. And he said, no. They hunt in order to have enough food so they can play. Play is the goal, not the means.
Okay, we're going to open up some questions now from your London fans. Okay, questions, please. Anyone got a question?
Or a thought.
A thought? Yes.
You're going to have to speak really loudly.
Julia?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Do I need to
I think you just have to shout.
Hi, Yulia Yushchenko here. I'm a lecturer in political economy and an enthusiast of alienation, gaming, and other things. I really enjoyed your talk, and this event is fantastic. What I do want to push you on, and I want us all to think about, is the gender dimension of the function of games in socialization of human beings. This whole idea that game is just a game is the perception of bourgeois mentality. Games play a function of socializing people into performing specific roles in society since societies existed. Games existed as leisure, but they always also played a serious function in teaching children how to do adult things. And that is very detailed, documented in anthropology and ethnography and so on and so forth. And so when I hear this appeals about games that, oh, come on, it's just a game, there shouldn't be utilitarian or you have utility to them, it makes me think that, you know, well, this is not my experience of games that I was taught growing up as a girl. Because the games that girls are taught are being trained to be mothers, and they're being given little kitchens, and they're being taught to sew, and all of those kind of things. Whereas boys are being taught to ride cars and be dangerous and throw caution to the wind. So there is this underlying gender dimension that I want us all to think about when we try to think about what function games play. And I think games are fantastic because, yes, they do have that utility, and socialization is very important. It can be played to discipline society, but also to empower individuals to become somebody very important. And that's why it's so fantastic that, you know, we can, through changing games and how we approach games, we can show boys that it's okay to raise children or cook food or whatever. But at the same time, of course, it can. There is also this dimension where those in power can manipulate masses through games and socialization. So it's just kind of, I'm not sure if it's a comment or a question, but if you would like to perhaps say something along those lines, because you have said quite a few things that made me think quite a few different things about these areas in your thinking. If you'd like to flesh it out a little bit more, it would be great. Thank you.
Does your daughter think you're a patriarch when you play games?
Yeah, I mean, games certainly serve a social function. You know, when you think about little boys in particular having, you know, fights, when they have play fights, part of the importance of the play fight is that you learn how far can you push it before the other person, you know, kind of wants to tap out. What's too painful and what's not, even in kind of verbal play. When have I actually hurt someone's feelings or not? And it does. It socializes you to understand what are the limits and how do I recognize that. You can even see dogs when they're fighting. They kind of figure out how hard can I bite and still have it and still be okay. And I agree that that gaming or play does prepare us in a certain way for specific roles in society. But the one place I would push back is how exactly is it training us? And I would argue that play trains us differently than real training. So playing house or playing cooking doesn't necessarily train the kids for the actual tasks that they're doing, but it conveys to them a certain essence of what these activities are. So it's not the technique that they're learning so much as the approach or the attitude. That's why I talked about mimesis in the classroom. So you're in the classroom, you see your teacher learning, and then you play at teaching. It's imitative play, there is a function to it, but it's not quite like the utilitarian functions of industrial society. It's not play that you learned how to cook cupcakes for 200 people. It's that you got to pretend you're mixing stuff and feel, now I'm making cupcakes. And what is that? You know, so it's a different it's something else. I would argue something more subtle is transmitted. But yeah, there's definitely a social and function to it.
There's a man with a beard right at the end.
Beard talking. So I would say it's about identity formation. So Lady's quite right. It is good. How is it practicing? Because it's forming an identity. It doesn't matter whether they're practicing the actual real tasks. They're forming an identity about their gender roles and what is appropriate for their gender roles. I say this as a father of a 5-year-old daughter, and I hate all that pink shit. So she's got to have like options. You can choose pink on her own terms, but not because I pressured her or anyone else pressured her. So it's about like what is appropriate. So I'm a former teacher. I'm now a lecturer, and I'm an academic. I research games, and I noticed when I was a school teacher that gender identities are very well formed by the age of about 12, 13, I noticed. So I taught my year 7s, which in this country is 11 and 12-year-olds. And a lot of the girls are quite happy to play games. And in primary schools in this country, they do quite a lot of sort of like learning to make games and stuff like that. But by the time when I left my former teaching job and I said I'm going to the games industry, like the girls in year 7, like the 11, 12-year-olds, like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's quite rad. But the girls from like who are 13, 14 years old and older, like, oh my God, that is so sad, man. Like, how could you even do that? I did teach in East London. Like, so how's that so, that it's so sad? Like, why do you want to go into the games industry, etc.? And it is very pejorative and very down because, like, they saw games as something that's not for them. They see technology as something not for them because they have already, consciously or unconsciously, and I would argue mainly the latter, they have started to take on what is an appropriate thing for them as women to do or not do. And so that is where those games are training people for society. They don't have to know the details, they just have to know what is appropriate for their gender role or not.
Did you get that, Doug?
Most of it. I mean, I don't know that it's begging for a response necessarily, though. I mean.
Hi, Douglas. I wondered, we've talked a little bit about play versus game, and my observation here is, as a late 40s man, I've noticed that the idea that I'm allowed to play games as I've grown up is slowly becoming more acceptable. There was a period of time when playing computer games in my 20s and 30s was actually less acceptable than doing so in my 40s and 50s because of the rise of the industry. But I've yet to see any expectation of a similar "it's okay to play." And I think I like the fact that we're drawing a distinction between gaming and playing. And it's almost like, okay, we've accepted that it's okay for someone to play games now, but it's still the games that matter and not the play. Can we boost the play, and how might we do that?
Well, the only way to boost the play would be to take down capitalism.
Okay.
I mean, real seriously. And we've got Richard for that, so thank God. No, but I mean, obviously the reason why play is acceptable for adults is because finally play or gaming has been made as expensive as any other adult activity. So now, sure, you can spend $500 on a console and $200 for a subscription to a game per month or something, and then hire someone else to actually build your character for you. I mean, it's big business. So sure, everybody's welcome now, to do that. The way I think that to make real play okay again would be to somehow, and this is a longer conversation, but is to find ways to carve out space for non-commodified human activity. And that's the whole message of Team Human, that find the others and spend time, breathe with them. When you spend 2 minutes looking into someone else's eyes or holding their hands, you're not spending anything. That, to me, is revolution. Just sitting with other people. What you're doing, sitting in a space together, breathing together, is conspiring, literally, conspire, to breathe together. That is the great conspiracy against capitalism. is people spending unproductive time with one another.
Not expending their labour value to create surplus value. On that thought, thank you. Thank you very much, Doug. That was, as usual, a wonderful contribution. We'd love to have you here in person, but hopefully next time, yeah? Lots of love from London.
Yeah, right. I'll be there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
You're a sweetie, as usual.